here we are again, back to cooking. And as you saw in the beginning, we're going to be doing Davy's pastries. These aren't a pastry in the sweet sense, but this is what this person perceived them as when he was 8 years old. Okay, they're a yeast bread, a roll, and you could use them like a muffin or a biscuit. They're very yeasty, they're good. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to start out with, and because it's a yeast product, we need to raise the yeast. Now, you can't use regular tap water. You have to use unchlorinated water. So if you live in town, just buy yourself a bottle of water. All right, now I'm doing the half recipe because the half recipe is a better one to start with if this is your first time with yeast, because if it messes up, you just are like, well, chuck it out, we'll try again. Because yeast is very touchy. You have to think about, it's simple, but you have to think about it as a child. Whenever you do anything with yeast, think about it as a baby, a little newborn baby. You want to be kind, treat it gently, give it unchlorinated water. All right, so what we're going to do is, we're doing the half recipe. So we are going to do 1 cup of warm water. And in the specifics of the ingredients, it does give you the temperature of the water. It can be anywhere from 95 degrees to 110 degrees maximum. But you really want to keep it between the 105 and the 110. Just get it up there. Get it past 95 degrees. All right, so what I usually do is, we live in town, so I have to use unchlorinated water, just a very cheap brand, and I'm going to put it in the microwave at very small increments because I really don't want it to go past that, and then it's just gonna, then I'm gonna have to wait for it to cool down, you know, blah blah. So while that's warming up, I'm going to measure my yeast. Now I use I don't know how you call it, just loose baking yeast. I buy it at a health food store, and I go through quite a lot of it, so I keep a big jar. This is a little more generous than I actually need, but here we go. And I'm doing the half batch, and the half batch says 1 packet, which is 2 1/4 teaspoons. Oh, let's test our water. Yep, it's fine. You can stick your finger in it, and it's warm, real warm, but not burning your fingers off. It's generally okay. All right, now you can test it with a thermometer, which would probably be a good idea if you're new to this. A teaspoon. So we're going to put in 2 1/4 teaspoons into this water. 1. I'm going to move this pan so you can see me do it. 1, 2 1/4. And luckily, I do have a quarter on here. Sometimes we don't have a quarter. There's a quarter. All right, now put the lid on. Put your yeast back in the refrigerator. You always want to keep your yeast refrigerated because it's not expensive, but it's not cheap. And you don't want to wreck it. So we also have to add to this, because the yeast in the warm water, they're having fun swimming, but they get tired, so they need sugar. We're going to put in 1/2 tablespoon. There are 3 teaspoons in a tablespoon. I am going to guesstimate. It's just regular sugar. You can use all of the basic ingredients. It doesn't have to be fancy. When you get better at this, then you can go fancy. So, 1/2 tablespoon. I'm going to say that's about right. You could be more technical about it, but I'm just going to go with that. Sometimes I stir and sometimes I don't. Now this is the funnest part to me. I like to get it in there, get the sugar going. Now, I don't know if you can see or not, but there are bubbles forming. If you can see bubbles, oh my gosh, it's so fun to watch the yeast grow. It just grows, and you get a little foamy top. It's so cool. I can see one. All right, Now, while that's proofing, that's what's called proofing your yeast. I have to turn this down. Proofing your yeast is what is, there's two reasons for it. One, you want to make sure your yeast is good because sometimes yeast can get old and die. And you want to make sure that you've got a good bubbling going on because when we add it to the flour, it's going to have a lot of work to do. All right, so that's done. Now we're going to start mixing together our other ingredients. Now, it says vegetable shortening. The easiest way to do this is to use these Crisco sticks. Now, I prefer the butter flavored, but our local place only had this, and I had to have it in a hurry the other day to make some pie crust, so I had to use the regular stuff. Now, it says you're going to use, for the half batch, you're going to use 1/4 cup. So you're going to look on here, and it says, these are so awesome. This is like the best thing since, I don't know, what do they say, sliced bread. So 1/4 cup is 4 tablespoons. So no matter where you cut on one of these, you can come at it from the other end. Like, see, I've cut it. So now I'm going to come from this end and go 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to cut it right there. Up, one down. Grab another one. All right. I'm going to cut it on the 4 tablespoon. This is another lovely part of these things. You can stick it right back in the tray. Pop the little lid on. Poof. It's all good. Now, we have 1/4 cup of vegetable shortening. There. Alrighty. Now, we need a teaspoon of salt. Just any regular salt, just regular table salt. I always pour it over the sink, and then that way I don't have extra in my recipe or have it on the floor. So double check, 1 teaspoon of salt, put it in. The next thing is 1 cup of flour. I'm just using regular, unbleached, all-purpose flour. 1 cup measure. You don't have to be real fussy about this. You know how when you're reading some recipes it says, sift gently into your thing, fluff it with a fork, don't get too much. Well, this is just 1 cup, clop-plunk. There it goes. Now we're in. Alrighty. Now, what I'm going to use to stir this is called a Danish whisk. This is relatively new to me last year. It was during the big sourdough bread phenomena in 2020. These became very popular, and I use it for everything now. I love it. And you're just going to mix this stuff in. Mix it in a little bit. Just, punk it up just a little. Mix around your salt and flour. Double check your list. Double check this. You take a screenshot at the very beginning so that you can keep double checking and to make sure you have everything, because sometimes when I get chatting, I forget stuff. And I can see I have it all in here, vegetable shortening, salt, and flour. Okay, now, can you see that the yeast has puffed up? It's proofed. Now we're going to just add this to the bread. Now, what we're just creating here is called a sponge, which is, you can see me doing this. Yep, you can see good. Okay. You just are going to mix this. And you want to mix it a lot, because what you're actually doing is, besides adding the yeast to the flour, you're creating gluten. That's where people say gluten-free. Now, I am not 100% sure, and I don't even know, I'm not even sure if you can make this gluten-free. You can Google it, say, can I use gluten-free flour 1-to-1 and make yeast bread? Now, I'm not sure, because the whole point of yeast bread is to create gluten. Gluten is the stuff, the chemical bond, the activity that makes things stick together and get bigger, and it makes it so that when the heat gets to it, it holds its shape. At least that's my perception. You can Google it. I Google everything. So if what I'm saying doesn't sound right, Google it. That's what you should always do when you hear something that doesn't sound right. My personal best advice. All right. Now, we have this mixed in pretty good. And it looks nice. It is very like cake batter. When you lift it up, you'll notice it like globs, like paper mache. That's good. Okay, now we're at a good point here. We do the last step before we stop for a bit. 1.5 to 2 cups of flour. Now this is the part where you have to be kind of careful. What you're going to do is you're going to add 1 cup. Because it says 1.5 to 2, so I'm going to go halfway and just add 1 cup right now. And then I'm going to mix it in. Now, when you're making a yeast product, I don't know if it's for all baking products, but when you're making bread of any kind and it's a yeast bread, you're going to notice some days are drier. The humidity in the air is, there's more or less. If you live in a really wet area, you're gonna have to add more flour. I mean, I'm not saying like 10 cups more. I'm just saying more than the recipe may call for. And so a lot of recipes will tell you that. They'll say, you know, considering the humidity in your home, you may have to add more or less. So that I have 1 cup in here. It's very dry right now because it's fall and it's autumn in New York, upstate New York, and it's dry. Our air is dry. So I'm going to add, it says on the small batch, it says 1.5 to 2. I'm going to add maybe 1/4 more. I would rather err on the side of less than more, because then you start fiddling with the liquid ingredients, and I mean, it'll work for you, but it's not going to be the best. I use our trusty knife. I'm going to scrape this off just to make sure that I'm getting everything. All right. All right. Here, there we go. Oh yeah, she's sticking together good. This is where, again, when you have a bread machine, it says pulling away from the sides smoothly or well. This is what it would look like in your bread machine. This is a human bread machine. Oh, it's pulling away. Okay, it's time to stop. So now we get into your classic activity that some people like and some people don't like. I will tell you, kneading. Now, with this particular recipe, I don't believe the kneading is as much as when I make a loaf of bread, but it's enough. And what you should have when you're kneading, whenever you're kneading bread or anything, I could have just used that. You want to have a little bowl of flour. You don't want to be kneading and then sticking your hand in the bag and pulling some out, because what you're doing is microscopically you're adding little yeast particles, moisture to your flour. Not good. It's going to make it not good. Okay, now you can see I put a nice little layer of flour on here. And that's something we're going to continually do. If you have intricate rings that have like grooves, like I have an old-fashioned setting, so it has a lot of grooves. In this ring, it has a lot of grooves. Take them off. Otherwise, you'll be getting your toothbrush out in the end and cleaning out your rings. And that's not always fun, because you don't always remember it until it's dried. It's like picking out cement from, I don't know, a picket fence, I guess. It's terrible. Or for you, those of you that have had braces and you get sticky candy and toffee up in your braces, yeah, well, that's what it's like getting this out of here. I'm going to move this so that you can see me knead this bread. Okay? Keep your hands moist. Do not add any more flour than necessary. It's just a pushing and pulling. All you're doing is developing more gluten. You're just making it very gluteny. That means stretchy, getting a good bond in there between the flour and the water and the yeast, so that when this gets air added to it, to me it kind of like looks like when people blow air into, can you hear my rabbit over there? Sparkle, stop! She obviously wants hay, but I'm not going to stop right at this point and give her hay. I don't want hay on my hands. Sparkle, stop! She's like, she has this little like hay rack, and it's a plastic thing I made. And then she's like, hey, I want hay. Oh. All right, I'm going to stop for a second, and I'm going to wash my hands, and I'm going to go give Sparkle some hay. And it'll give this a time to just sit. It doesn't hurt anything. It's only a few minutes. Hello, back again. Just gave Sparkle her stuff. Wash my hands, and I'm coming back now. All right, now you can see this is still going. This is a really nice, it's really nice, and it's already holding a dent. So, but I'm gonna knead it just a little bit more. This is a wonderful recipe because it is quick. It's not like bread. If I were you doing bread right now, oh, we'd have another 5 minutes of kneading, possibly. But there are no rise recipes. And once you get confident working with yeast, you can just go into any kind of bread. It's just feeling confident and feeling comfortable about working with yeast. So this feels good. Notice how when I'm rolling this around, this is a stone, it's, I don't know, marble, something like that. And notice how you can just do it on your plastic counter. We have just regular old-fashioned linoleum counters. You can do it there. But you'll notice when you're moving it around, it's not sticking. It's not sticking to my hands. And then the next test is you poke your finger in, and do you see how the hole stays? I don't know if you can see that or not. I'm going to do it close. You're going to poke it in, pull your finger out, and do you see how the hole stayed there? Done. Do not add any more flour. It's not sticky, and it's hit its maximum capacity. Now, this recipe is different than bread. If you were going to do bread, it's a 2-step rising process. This is only 1 step, which makes it awesome. I forgot to grab a cutter, so I'll grab one right now. There. Move all these tricky things over because we don't want an accident when we're so nearly done. Okay. What we're going to do is, we're going to spread flour out. Now what I use, because you're at the step now where it says roll out your dough, and you're going to cut it. Another trick with cookie cutters is put a glob of flour down and do this. And it coats the inside and everything so that you don't have cookie stuff that sits. What I'm going to do is just spread this out. You can use a rolling pin. I probably should just for sake of showing you, but I'm not going to because we're so close. Now this is a nice sized batch for your first time. You're going to take your cookie cutter, and like my old home ec teacher said, you always nestle them together and work close to the edge because you do not want to be wasting that precious dough. Good Lord, that lady, she could make cookies. Well, she'd have us making them. She'd scrape that bowl so clean, forget it. You weren't getting even a lick. You weren't getting nothing. You weren't getting a vapor off the bowl. Boy, she was something. She was good, but I always remember that thinking, oh my gosh, there's nothing for us to lick. Oh well. When you're in junior high and you're a growing teenage person, you're always looking to eat something. Now, what I'm going to do is just place these on a nice tin, which could have parchment paper on it, but it doesn't. I do believe they'll be fine. We'll put them floured side up, down, so that just in case, when we take them off, I'll tell you if I really should have used parchment paper. Now, they don't expand like a cookie, so you can put them not too close because they're going to puff a little bit, but they're not going to go really crazy. Like like you know some cookies do when you're baking them. Okay, I'm just gonna do a couple more. They're like, I would say, 1/4 of an inch, you know, thick. I don't know, I like them to be nice and hearty. And I'm just gonna do these two, and we'll save the other ones for another one. Now we're gonna stop here, and I'm gonna cover these with saran wrap, and I'm gonna let them sit and just rise. We're just gonna raise them for a half hour or so, and then we'll pop them in the oven. All right? Okay. So I don't think you're going to need to see how they go in the oven. You know how an oven works, I hope, because if you don't, I don't know how you got this far. Let's see, 350 degrees. I'm going to go preheat the oven, let these sit for half an hour. Maybe like halfway through I'll turn the oven on. I don't want to just be running willy-nilly for a half an hour. Yeah, the electric company would love me, but that's okay. So it's going to be 350 and raise a half an hour. And I'm going to cook them for 7 minutes or until they're kind of brown. I'll let you know what it turns out. When I pull them out of the oven, I'll take more pictures for you. All right. Thank you for sharing this time with me. Toodaloo. Okay, here we are back again for the reveal. Here we go. Fresh out of the oven. Yum, yum. Now, what I often do when I make them, I don't want it to sit right on this board, this hot pan on there, so I just put it on there. What I usually do is I cook these and time them so that they're going to come out when I'm going to eat them right off with the family. So what I'll usually do is take like a stick of butter or pat of butter or whatever, and I rub it over the tops of them. But seeing that we're not going to eat them right now because it's in the morning, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cool them off. And you can see, these could have gone a little bit longer maybe. They're good, but they could have went a little longer. You want to put them in your oven and time them, and they should be brown on the outside. These could go a little longer, but the reason maybe mine didn't, I'm going to pop them back in for a few seconds, but that's the end of the show, folks. They should be a little golden around the edges. When you lift one up, it should be brown on the underside, not this color. Okay, so that's all there is to it. The cooking part, you know how you like your rolls, okay? If you're skeptical and you're not quite sure, take one out of the oven, open it up, and see if it looks the way you like. You'll know. We're old enough. We've eaten enough muffins. We know what we want to see. I'm going to pop these in there for now. And I'm going to say thank you for coming and watching with me.